This is a pretty good crowd for 9 a.m. on a Sunday morning after all the festivities last night. I'm impressed, actually. There's maybe like 30 people missing. That's a pretty good number. So, Nation of Makers. I'm going to start with a little bit of an odd story. I woke up last Sunday, a week ago, with a bit of toothache. And that toothache got a little bit worse over the week. By Thursday, after spending 2 days with chills, rocking back and forth, I was giving a lecture for Yale University in New York City, and my colleague was like, "Yeah, you look kind of terrible. I'm going to call a dentist for you and make an emergency appointment." So we cut the 3-hour lecture short to 2 hours so I could make it over to the dentist. Go to the dentist, they do a bunch of scans, they send me to a specialist to give me a CT scan, and the results came back and they said, "Yeah, you have 2 broken teeth. You've kind of smashed them up into your sinus cavity. So we're going to schedule you for major dental surgery Friday." Friday was 2 days ago. Instead of going for major dental surgery, I did this. I flew out to NOMCON, and I happen to be a fairly rational person. I'm actually a biomedical engineer by training, so I know a lot about biomechanical systems and medicine and health. And I know there's a lot more to life than giving a keynote. So I've been asking myself, why am I here? What made me choose NOMCON over surgery and recovery? Now you know this story. So some of the board members who might or might not have noticed that my cheek was pretty puffy, I've been icy all weekend. I had told the story of smashing my teeth. And so I'm going to get to this question of why am I here. But first, I'm going to show you some of my early work, and I will probably, if I can turn this mic on, I'll put audio on this. This is up all the way. Oh, even better. We have sorry, the AV guys hate it when we do this. I'll replay the video with audio so you can hear it. Because it's worth it. I mentioned that I had audio and then I forgot to make sure that we plugged it in. Thank you.
It's February 1st, 2005, and here with me is Design Lab concept number 1087, Morocco's Dora. Now, one thing to notice as Morocco's Dora does her thing is she'll rock back and forth off her feet, jump from the side to the left against the list. And I'll just go ahead and play this routine. Ready? Go.
So, early Excellent. Early in my career, I worked on stuff like this. I was a biomedical engineer who spent years in school training to make devices and technologies that save people's lives. I took a little detour out of college after grad school and got hired to a design firm that had been making medical devices, but when they hired me, they said, "Yeah, we're going to change our mind. We're going to make toys instead." And thought to myself, well, whatever, it's a paycheck. I'll take the job for a little bit. And it was mostly a 9-to-5 job. It gave me enough time on the side, and over the summer to race bicycles semi-professionally. A friend of mine won the Tour de France in 2008. But really came down to a year of doing interesting things that were meaningful to me, and then 9 more years of making prototype after prototype, Elmo after Elmo, dolls with sound and lights that I would never, ever, ever buy for my kids or recommend to any of my friends, but essentially equated to landfill. And at the end of 10 years, I realized, wow, I made about 1,200 working prototypes that had that degree of fidelity that I could put in front of a marketing executive at Hasbro, well, not just any executive, we work with the senior VPs of marketing or CEOs of these companies to say, this is going to be your next hit toy. And at the end of that time, I looked back and said, I think the work that I've done could fill 5 football stadiums from the football pitch to the top of the lights with plastic landfill. Is that going to be the legacy of my career? So this was also a moment, 2005, when something was burgeoning in the US that I like to call the modern American maker movement. And there was something that resonated with the work process that I developed. The ability to create 1,200 prototypes over 9-10 year span meant that I was making basically 1 to 2 to 3 working high-fidelity prototypes every week by myself. We had a 4-person team, but my colleagues ran around and showed the ideas off, or would have meetings with marketing executives. And I was doing the engineering, the design, coming up with concepts, recording sounds, composing music, but it was still mostly a 9-to-5 job. And when all of that ended, I started doing work that was meaningful to me, to myself again. And that fast forwards a little bit to why I broke these 2 teeth. So Sunday morning, I had been up until 4 a.m. working on a project, disaster relief housing, refugee housing for the United Nations. I'd also been working on another project, that project was with Yale University, a project for MIT, trying to reinvent how we make and grow food, how we make food resilient as the climate changes. So I only got an hour or 2 of sleep before I woke up again to do more work. And in that hour or 2, the stress and tension, as the dentist said, yeah, that just builds up in your jaw. And you can generate enough force from that stress and tension while you're asleep to do exactly what you did, which is shove 2 teeth up in your sinus cavity and shatter them in the process. They became infected. I was in the worst pain of my life. So hopefully you're thinking, this is gross. I'm telling you this, and really, what does this have to do with NOMCON? So I'm going to turn that question back at you for a moment and ask you what keeps you up at night. Besides your families, which should be hopefully the most important thing in your life that you're the most passionate about, what is the work that would cause you that kind of stress and consternation and passion and devotion that would drive you to break 2 teeth with the force of the thoughts in your head? So I'm going to take a moment and let you tell me on Twitter. So I want you guys go online right now. Send me a message on Twitter or on Slack, on the NOM Slack, because I'd love to aggregate that from this community as a member of the board of Nation Makers, just to understand better what our community cares about. This silence is really awkward on the
For people that aren't using Twitter, how do they reach you guys?
Yes, my email is kipp@nationmakers.com. So you can also, what's that?
.us.
.us, sorry, that's right.
It's okay,
kipp@nationmakers.us.
Some people are saying we don't do Twitter, so.
Yeah, if you're into Twitter and NOMCON Slack, Kipp with 2 P's, remember Kipp, K-I-P-P, at nationofmakers.us. All right, since about a third of you have returned your eyes to the stage, I'll tell you a little bit more about the things that I'm working on. People keep asking me, and none of the stuff that I'm working on is on my website or online yet, because I haven't put it there. So solving for water is one of the big challenges that I'm passionate about, and I'm currently trying to develop some solutions and technologies for. You all have heard about Flint, Michigan, and the water problems in Flint, Michigan. What's really interesting about what happened in Flint, Michigan, what's happening in Flint, Michigan, is that in the world today, we have major organizations like the United Nations, like the Gates Foundation, who are trying to address the lack of safe, clean water for a lot of the developing world, which is a massive problem. And we also have, in the developed world, really good infrastructure that's dedicated to providing clean water to those of us who can afford it. But it turns out that there's a gap that nobody really knows about, nobody really talks about, and nobody's really addressing. And that gap happens to be this. If you live in one of those areas that's pink, in the last 15 years, last 20 years, you have had contaminated water. But wait a second, that's pretty much all of us. So in any given year, between 1982 and 2015, somewhere between 9 million and 45 million people in the United States had contaminated water. And that's every year. So you think, oh, well, we'll just do what people did in the old days when water was contaminated and drink beer because that purifies everything. Bacteria get killed. Except all of the beer has plastic in it because we've completely destroyed our water supply and contaminated it with plastics, in addition to all the other chemicals. So how do you solve that problem? Well, you go in your garage with some refrigeration compressors, tanks of propane and butane, and you weld up an atmospheric water generator. Everyone? Anyone? You with me? Okay, so I go into my garage and I build this, where I put in electricity, and for every kilowatt hour of electricity I put in, I get about 2 liters of water out, which go through a filtration system and is clean, pure drinking water that I know exactly where it came from. So, thinking about water, let's skip through some of this stuff, is really critical because that solution is an expensive solution. It uses a lot of electricity, and it's not going to be the solution for the future of humanity. But if I think about the tools that I have, it's something that I can make a pretty big impact with. And it's something that I feel really compelled to make a big impact with. And it turns out that the more I dig into this question of water, the more I find out, wow, there's a really weird relationship between water and energy. Compute, for those of you who know thermodynamics, the amount of energy it takes for your hot shower in the morning. I can tell you approximately how much energy my shower took, which is somewhere around 20 million joules. Joules might not be that meaningful to you, but it's a lot of energy, I'll just say that. Do the calculation yourself, you can kind of Google everything you need. So the reason I bring that up, though, is that where does that energy go? What is it being used for? I'm basically bouncing hot water off my body and sending it down the drain. So all of that energy is completely wasted. Now, 100 years ago, when we thought about abundance in society, water had no cost, no value. Energy had no cost, no value. So we can waste water, we can waste energy like that. But today we can't. So fixing that relationship, solving that challenge, addressing this problem is something that's super exciting and something that there's no motivation on behalf of power companies, of water companies, of the appliance manufacturers. If you're a water heater manufacturer, you're not going to say, let's reduce the amount of energy it takes to take a hot shower. So the people who are motivated to address these challenges are not the existing infrastructure. They're not the corporations. And as we our current government, we can't count on our government to protect us from the greed of corporations or just the lack of care of corporations. There's market forces that we depend on in our capitalist society are not going to drive companies to reduce their revenue. Simple as that. So it's up to us. So reinventing thermal systems is the work that I was doing at MIT. I got hired for this weird position called Professor of Other, or rather, it was a faculty search for a Professor of Other, someone who was so interdisciplinary that they were anti-disciplinary. And the selection came down to a handful of people, and one of the senior faculty said, well, this guy, Kipp Bradford, he's kind of an oddball. He's not like a normal academic. So yeah, because I'm a biomedical engineer, toy inventor, bike racer, thermodynamicist, who likes to weld up cooling systems in the garage. But the challenge that they gave me when they hired me was, you've got 2 years to invent a new field of science. And the first 6 months, I was in like existential crisis. I spent all my time just obsessing over what does that mean. And I had done a number of talks and presentations and done some work on new theories of economics and how innovation changes economics, kind of derived from my understanding of what impact the maker movement had. I also had new programming language ideas that were derived from seeing things like Max MSP and how people were using that. So all these things that I thought were like pretty good academic exercises, really good research topics. But my colleagues at the media lab were like, nah, you're not an economics professor, and even if you were, that stuff's not going to have any impact. There were 2 criteria for my job. One was that my work had to have magic, and the second was that it had to have impact. That's how I was being judged. So after 6 months, I said, you guys are crazy. I give up. I crack uncle, I'm tapping the mat. I'm going to go hang out in my garage, and all this high-food academic stuff, I'm going to ignore that. But this office that you have here at the Media Lab, the air conditioning is terrible, the heating's terrible, it's uncomfortable all the time. You all complained about it to me. When I was first hired, they said, oh, you're that guy that's done some weird air conditioning projects. Can you fix the air conditioning in our building? And so while I'm at it, I can probably fix the toilets too and make those work better. If you want me to be a faculty member and doing the maintenance around here, you're paying a lot for that. I'm sure that's what you want me to be doing. I'm not sure that I can publish how I clean the toilets. So I actually, that response, the initial kind of faculty interest in the air conditioning, refrigeration, heating stuff I've been doing, pushed me away from it. Because the thought was, like, this building has a problem and you can fix it. And I was like, that's not going to change the world. That's not magic impact. That's fixing your air conditioning. There are companies that do that. But after 6 months, when I kind of gave up, I was like, I'm just going to do something fun for myself. There's no point in me trying to come up with a new field of science that I can publish about. So I started working on these projects, and each one started to grow. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought about what heating and cooling does in our society, and the impact that refrigeration has had on our global food chain. Like, we eat the way we eat because of refrigeration. The fact that you can have chocolate and paper and all sorts of other things that need to be manufactured under controlled humidity and controlled temperature conditions. Oh, and by the way, as Google knows, our entire computing infrastructure relies on cooling. All of it. As does our medical establishment. And, last but not least, we can live comfortably in places like Santa Fe, New Mexico, in places like Pawtucket, Rhode Island, because we have heating and cooling. And there's so much more. But 100 years after Willis Carrier commercialized air conditioning, the standards are that if you build a building and 50% of the occupants, greater than 50%, don't say that the building sucks, you've succeeded. This is actually the standard, the architectural standard is that if only 20% or fewer people in the building complain about how crappy the ventilation and temperature control in the building is, only 20% complain, you successfully completed that building project. But cooling has an enormous impact on the environment. And it turns out to be, as lots of people have recently pointed out, the #1 factor in global warming today. What does that mean? When the thing that we use to protect ourselves from heat is the #1 cause of heating the planet. Think about that. You don't need to think about it for very long to understand how bad a problem that is. And who's working on this? Where are the startups in Silicon Valley who are like, yeah, we're gonna innovate that. We're gonna disrupt. We're gonna take out, I'll talk to you afterwards. We're gonna take out the carriers of the world. We're gonna take out these multinational global juggernauts that have $100 billion revenue per year, that are funded by sovereign wealth funds. Like Samsung is so tied into the Korean government that these recent corruption trials that have thrown people in jail, the government and the leadership of Samsung have proven how impossible it is to detangle these relationships. The companies that do air conditioning refrigeration happen to be the largest in the world. And it's a completely ignored industry. Nobody cares about it except for me and you and a handful of people outside of the industry. So I can't stand up here and talk about how big of an issue this is without having my hand in a number of projects trying to solve these problems. I'm working with a company that's actually getting a lot of interest, a lot of funding based on one of my previous technologies, which is an air conditioner that lets you open the window when it's not that hot out. Simple idea. It also lets you use non-global warming refrigerants safely. When I was at the Media Lab at MIT, I thought about making chair conditioners. Like, think about this space in here right now. All of the energy that's going into cooling this room is mostly dedicated to cooling the walls, the air, the ceiling, with a tiny little bit of that cool residing 4 feet above the floor where all of us are at. Is that an efficient way to keep people comfortable? Why do we have air conditioning in the first place? Not to make the walls cold, not to make the air cold or the ceiling cold, to make the occupants comfortable. But the way these systems are designed, the way they're made, the way they're manufactured, completely ignores people. I was at the Department of Energy, and I'm going to disparage the Department of Energy for a second, even though they fund my research. I was at the Department of Energy meeting talking about human thermal comfort with 50 of the top scientists in the world, and I was the only person who had any sort of biological background. The only person who developed products for humans. It was a room full of chemists and mechanical engineers talking about chemistry and mechanical engineering for thermal comfort for humans. That made no sense. So, chair conditioners. Chair conditioners is great. What about the fact that thermal regulation is a very fundamental biological function? If you can't thermally regulate, you die. Have any of you heard of pursuit predation? Raise your hand. Okay, it's not enough of you, so I'll have to explain. Humans are the most incredible hunters for one very specific reason. We can chase down every and any animal in the animal kingdom and kill it. No matter how fast it is, no matter how strong it is. For the very simple reason, that we can reject heat more effectively than any other creature on the planet. If you want to eat a cheetah, the cheetah will sprint away from you at 75 miles an hour for about 45 seconds, and then it will stop. But you will run at 7 to 10 miles an hour, and you will keep running at 7 to 10 miles an hour. And 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, you will get to that cheetah who's heat exhausted, and you'll kill it and eat it. The zebras, the lions, the bears, the tigers, the horses, we can outrun anything over extended distances. So pursuit predation, if you look it up on the internet, there are lots of funny memes about it. But that biological function is an amazingly critical aspect of the way human beings' bodies work. So one of the things I've been thinking about is what happens when that biological function stops? Where are the people who are trying to address thermal comfort and thermal control for people whose bodies aren't working so well? Turns out that nobody is. So I've been thinking about thermal prosthetics, where you can restore and enhance biological function. There are lots of cases where this is critical. For example, if you have multiple sclerosis, your body no longer regulates heat, which is traumatic for people. About 50% of male factor infertility is caused through testicular temperature regulation issues. So if you're going to go through any kind of IVF, in vitro fertilization processes, which cost tens of thousands of dollars for insurance processes, well, maybe the first step should be a $2,000 or $1,000 air-conditioned pair of underwear before we spend all that money trying to solve a problem that we can solve more easily. It also turns out that you can enhance people's athletic performance pretty significantly by cooling them really effectively. So I've consolidated all this work into my cooling global challenges, which is thinking about smart heating cooling for efficient buildings, making people more comfortable in a wider variety of situations, and also looking at new ways of pumping heat, moving heat around. And as I started thinking about new ways of moving heat around, one of the things I realized was that, I can reduce global warming. Because if I can solve these problems effectively, if I can make new technologies and bring my skills to bear on innovation, well, we can reduce that relationship between heating systems and cooling systems using energy to make the planet hotter. Just to throw out a couple other things that I happen to be working on recently or have worked on. I've been working on reinventing hearing. One of the things that happened when I was doing toys is that I did a lot of audio signal processing and a lot of very, very, very inexpensive audio technologies like 4-cent chips that can play really, really good quality sound. And from learning those lessons, I thought, hearing aids are $2,500 or more. And if you're in the developing world, they're completely inaccessible, unavailable, and unaffordable. So could I take what I've learned out of the toy industry and make products that address people's needs better? I'm also going to put a shout out for some organizations that I'm passionate about, put my time into, in addition to Niche and Makers. As was mentioned, I'm on the board of Maker Ed, and education is an area that's very important to me. I'm on the board of the Legal Board Foundation because tools and low-cost, open-source tools that empower people are important to me. But I want to wrap up with a few thoughts. There are a whole bunch of other things that I would love to talk about. But I'm going to dig into something that bothers me, which is the word making. We are a nation of makers. It's the name of the organization. But I actually kind of hate the word making. It's this catch-all. It means everything and means nothing. We all talk about it being this fundamental human activity. Well, so is walking. And if you think about walking, and you think about Silicon Valley, for years, computer programmers were sitting at computers. And then somebody said, hey, there's a better way. We should stand up. We should put our desks on treadmills. And now we can walk. And it was like, oh my God, we've just discovered walking. And everyone outside of Silicon Valley was like, yeah, we've been doing that for like the entirety of human civilization. You just forgot how because you're so obsessed sitting in front of your computers. And all of a sudden, walking became fetishized. Everybody was excited about it because it was this tech elite that was emphasizing the power of walking and selling products around walking. And all of a sudden, walking became this new special thing. And I feel sort of the same way about making. It's like this thing that we've always done. And everybody does it. So if that's the case, why are we here? Why is this important? Why is this special? Like, yeah, it's just a thing. It's a thing that humans do. And just because there was a moment, I call it the modern American maker movement, because I think there were some things that happened that are important. And I want to recognize those things. But first, I want to talk about what I mean when I use the term making. And I want to focus on the top word there, which is enhancement. To me, making is a process by which I enhance the world, I enhance society, I enhance the things around me, I enhance technologies, I enhance the value and the lives of my community members, I enhance the strength of my community and the strength of my country. But I also recognize that making should not solely be a pursuit that you will grind your teeth into a pulp over. There has to be fun, there has to be love. I believe that making is an important part of education because making is a process through which we can explore our world, we can explore new information, we can explore new knowledge. I think making is also valuable for entertainment. I have not yet been over to the Alworth, and I don't think I'm actually going to be able to make it on this trip. So I'm going to have to come back to Santa Fe just to go to the Alworth. But that sounds like it embodies this idea of making for entertainment and exchange. The idea that we as human beings want to interact with each other, we want to communicate, we want to love and be loved. Well, that's things that we can do by the artifacts that we create. So this idea of making as a process by which we can exchange knowledge, we can exchange information, we can exchange parts of ourselves, is very, very important to me. So I'm going to close with two final thoughts. One is my analogy, Silicon Valley, has a second piece to it, which is that there's been a strong emphasis on computer science education and making education to create the workforce of the future. And a lot of time that comes down to, oh, we need people who are engineers and scientists so that they can get STEM careers. And I recognize the value of STEM careers, they are highly paid. But I was an engineering educator at several universities and in the process of becoming one at Yale University. And my job was to teach engineering. So the kids that I got that had spent like 8 years before college learning engineering were useless to me. What was I going to teach them? Shakespeare? No, they should have learned that beforehand. My point is that a lot of this emphasis on STEM and STEAM to create factory drones for the jobs of the future, to me, loses the point of these activities. It loses why we do them. The idea that we can explore our world, we can explore ourselves. And it's just a shift in saying, oh, we need more programmers. Yeah, that's great, but let's teach those programmers to be able to react and respond to a dynamically changing world where technology today is not going to be the technology tomorrow. I don't want kids learning Java in 5th grade. I want kids learning how to understand systems of logic, of structure, of format. I want kids who understand social sciences, who understand humanity, and can translate that into new technologies that are appropriate, that are positive and supportive. So, if I can be known as the guy who does not like bridges in the middle of the ocean, I would be happy about that. Because fundamentally, it's key to me to make sure that students understand that the work they do is not in a vacuum, that the impact that we can have is not inert, that technology has active life after you put it out in the world. And if you create technology properly, then that impact can be positive. And if you don't, then we can have things that are highly destructive. But typically, we look at technology as this thing that's for the beauty of the technology itself. Like, let's create a bridge because the structures are nice, and pre-stressed reinforced concrete is a really, really cool material that can hold lots and lots of mass. Yes, those things are all true. But if you build a bridge between, say, the Palisades, New Jersey and Brooklyn, New York, that's going to be much, much, much better than building a bridge like in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, say. So I will leave you with that, and I think there will be questions after the second keynote. Thank you.